Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking another fun and exciting episode for you guys this evening as we're taking a look at more Nintendo 64 recompilation projects that are in the works. Because last week I did part 1 of this video, and if you missed that, I will leave a link in the description below. But decompilations of recompilations are all the rage these days. People are getting very excited about them. We're seeing a lot more getting close to coming to fruition. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. 4 more games that are in development that hopefully you'll play soon. And before you go down below and yell at me about the word soon, it can mean anything you want. To me, it means in the next year or so, but for some people, if it's not next week, they seem to think I'm making things up. Moving to the first game that's definitely going to get a lot of people excited, there is an active recompilation project for Smash Brothers, and this is definitely going to excite a lot of people. Now, as far as I'm aware, it's just for the base game, not Remix, but I'm sure Remix may come in the future. But it's one of those things, there is still a massive fan base for this game, it's still played competitively, and it's one of those games that basically just launched an entire franchise for Nintendo that people fell in love with back on Nintendo 64. And while I do think playing this game on an N64 is a good time, whether you're in the Mr. FPGA core or original hardware, getting something like 16:9 support with a high frame rate would absolutely be incredible. Now, I am curious to see how that higher frame rate would impact some of the timing windows as far as the actual moveset, because it's one of those things, fighting games compared to platformers or other games like Majora's Mask really do rely on the timings and the frame input windows to be able to pull off moves. I'm sure the developers have something in mind, but it was the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about increasing the frame rate of something like Smash Brothers, if it would change the overall control scheme in any way, shape, or form. And if you are a huge Smash Brothers fan and you are a competitive player, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, because one of those things that just popped into my head and I would be curious about it. But this game still looks stunning to this day in that Nintendo 64 art style, but getting it in high resolution and high frame rate would be a fun time, and it would definitely probably bring more people to playing it if they didn't actually grow up with the game, because that's a lot of thing about these recomps. It brings a new audience to games that we know, love, and remember from back in the day. And it's one of those things, I hear a lot of comments from a lot of people talking about the fact that they didn't grow up with Nintendo 64 and they just feel like the games are a little bit too old at this point in time. If you weren't alive when Nintendo 64 was on store shelves, or you were born but not playing games yet, maybe you got something like Smash Brothers on the GameCube entry and you really feel like that is the start of the franchise. So going back to the visual stylings of something like the original Smash Bros on Nintendo 64 could feel a little bit antiquated. I love it, but that doesn't mean everybody does. So getting a recomp again doesn't just bring new features and new improvements to fans of the game and the hardware, it also brings new people to the game in the first place. And when we talk about video game preservation, it's not just making sure that everything runs well and people can enjoy a game however they want, it's also making sure that we bring new people to the party, so when we inevitably die off, and trust me, it's going to happen one day to all of us, there are other people out there that still want to carry the torch for these games, still want to play them, and still want to work on them, and that's why I think it is crucially important. Leave me your thoughts down below in a comment. Now, moving over to another game that is apparently getting a recomp status, you are seeing some of the Majora's Mask recomp footage here, but don't forget, there's only 2 Zelda games on Nintendo 64, but if you take fan mods, some of them are every bit as good and in some ways slightly better than Nintendo's own work, and they could be recompiled too. And there is one game that has an ongoing recomp status project, and it's going to be awesome to see something like that come in, because the Dinosaur Planet recomp was a fun time seeing a game that never technically released for Nintendo 64 run, but getting some fan hacks will absolutely be even better. Now, this is Indigo. It's basically a sequel to Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo 64, but it is made by fan developers, and I have seen footage of this running, and it is working in the recomp engine as far as Zelda 64 is concerned. And I noticed recently we got mod support for modding something like the Majora's Mask recompilation, but it seems like in the future, if makers want to, they're going to be able to take their ROM hacks and then put them within that recompiled framework and be able to show you guys their work with all of those quality of life improvements that you just saw in the previous Majora's Mask footage. And that is why recompilation is fun in its own right. It doesn't just mean the retail library, North American, PAL, and Japanese for Nintendo 64. It means anything that anyone has made that runs on Nintendo 64 as far as a ROM hack is concerned would work as well if people actually dedicate the time. And I can't stress enough, I like to remind you guys every single video, recompiling stuff isn't just dragging and dropping and clicking a compile button. It does require a lot of work, but I would say it's going to sound even better recompiled. It's your first soundtrack sample, and I'll be right back with more. Honestly, the soundscape in this game is amazing, and it has a nice horror aesthetic, at least in this cave. And if you've never played Indigo before, I can't recommend it enough. If you want to start today, I would just leave a link in the description below to the GitHub page where you can grab the patch and patch your own version of The Legend of Zelda, because it is one of those experiences I would say it gets very close to rivaling the work that Nintendo did on both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And that is the fun thing about the Zelda 64 recompilation and decompilation project. It's going to mean, if people want it to, games like fan hacks and new games like this are going to work within that framework. But again, it isn't a free thing. It does take a lot of work, and I know Indigo is one of the games. Hopefully you'll be playing a recompilation project soon of it. Now moving over to the meme game for Nintendo 64, this is Brian 64. Yes, I know it's called Quest 64, but I'm never going to call it that. And it's one of those games that had a lot of ambition, it had a lot of motivation, it just didn't in the end come together to be the project the developers were trying to make it. And as much fun as sometimes people make up Quest 64, you can definitely tell the people that were making it were in love with the game, and they were trying their damnedest to make an amazing 10 out of 10 3D RPG for the Nintendo 64. They just didn't really succeed, but it is another game. If you go online, there is some footage out there of the recomp in progress, but it's not my footage, and I never include other people's work in my videos unless I get permission from them, and I wasn't able to get in touch with anyone as of the recording of this video. But this is the type of game, even if it's not the best game on Nintendo 64, I think would greatly benefit from being recompiled into a native PC release. I would love to see the analog camera be controllable in some areas with the second analog stick, because even in the free roaming areas, that camera can definitely get stuck a ton behind walls. And I totally understand this was still the era of 3D where developers were getting a hang of actually even making 3D worlds and understanding how to show you the camera in them. So it would be beneficial if we had control of that, if it was possible. Secondarily, we have seen mod support come to engines at least like the Majora's Mask recomp, where you can actually mod in new textures, and if that's something that could be done to Quest 64, I think it would greatly benefit as well, because of course this has the muddy Nintendo 64 textures that basically every game does, but I'd say the art style is a little bit lacking here as well, and it can just feel like big seas of drab browns and grays and yellows all over the place. But Quest 64, there is a good game inside of it somewhere. Sometimes you have to hunt for it, but it is another project that hopefully soon is going to be completely recompiled, and you can play it on your PC. And if modders want to go through and give me one of my wishlist items, and this is just a joke, and I don't expect anyone to do it, it would be going through and completely changing the combat in Quest 64, because areas like this are charming as that early 3D vibe, and I do appreciate it. When you actually get to the combat of Quest 64, that's where I think the game 100% just falls down almost entirely. I know it would be a big mod, but you see people creating entirely new games for Nintendo 64 hardware. I'm sure if someone loved this game enough and wanted to play around with it, that combat could be fixed. Now moving over to the last game that I do know a recomp project is in the works, it is Chameleon Twist. This game is definitely charming, I love it, and it's got one of my favorite soundtracks on Nintendo 64, not called Bomberman Hero. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, I'll be right back and talk more about its recomp project. I mean, that music is a vibe, and you probably either love it or hate it, but for me, it's some of the most fun music on the Nintendo 64. There's something about bright, cheery, colorful, fun soundtrack platformers on the Nintendo 64 that I just 100% love from back in the day. I played Chameleon Twist, I played all 3 Bomberman games. If there was a 3D platformer on N64, you know damn well that child me 100% wanted to have it, and probably even mowed lawns in the summer at the country club and blew all of his money on nothing but Miller High Life and Nintendo 64 games. That really was my joy, and it still is. And honestly, I bought a lot of those games used because I wasn't drinking High Life when this game first came out. But the reality is, this would be another great one to see recompiled, and it is in progress, because it's one of those things I just want to see this game looking better visually. Again, the textures are a little bit muddy, the models are a little bit simplistic, so that resolution bump internally, getting it in widescreen, would just bring a platformer that definitely I would consider at least to be obscure at this point in time to way more people in a way better looking version, and it would just be more fun. And that's that's what these recomps really are. It's not like they're creating new games. We can play every single game in this video and the previous video on real Nintendo 64 hardware on the Mr. FPGA core or in an emulator like Ares. There isn't any quote-unquote technical need to have these things, and a lot of people say, why do people even bother? The reality is it's just fun, and why the hell not? If we can do something like this, if we can have recompiled and decompiled version of games, and rebuilding them from scratch with so many new features, quality of life improvements, and visual upgrades, why wouldn't you want that? Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, of the 4 games in this video, which one do you want to see first? I'm guessing Smash Bros. Is going to be the overwhelming success. But I'll see you next time. Bye bye.